Have you ever noticed that there are people who seem to have been born with an invisible gift? Everything they touch prospers, opportunities simply appear, and money seems to flow to them effortlessly? While others struggle, work tirelessly, follow methods, repeat mantras, and remain trapped in the same cycle of scarcity. Itzhak Bentov, scientist and mystic, revealed something that most people still haven't understood, something so simple and, at the same time, so revolutionary, that it completely changes the way we understand money. He said that abundance is not the result of what you do, but of what you vibrate. And that is the only thing that separates those who merely wish to prosper from those who truly manifest abundance. For years, we were taught that money comes from effort, discipline, luck, or even a divine blessing reserved for a few. But Bentov proved, through science and spirituality combined, that there is a much deeper law operating behind everything: the vibrational frequency of consciousness. Money, according to him, is not a reward, it is a response. It does not go to those who chase it, it goes to those who understand it. And this is where many get lost. They try to attract what they have not yet learned to tune into. Because it is not willpower that creates abundance, it is vibration. If your mind vibrates in scarcity, the universe can only respond at that same frequency. But when you understand this one thing, this vibrational key that Bentov revealed, reality begins to reorganize. The doors that were closed open. Money flows from unexpected sources. Life ceases to be a race and becomes a natural, aligned, full movement. In this video, you will understand why abundance is not a privilege, it is a frequency. You will understand how your energetic field interacts with the universal field, and why changing your vibration is the only real way to change your financial reality. And perhaps, at the end of this journey, you will realize that the secret was never outside, it was always within, waiting for you to remember who you truly are. Itzhak Bentov used to say that abundance is not a prize to be conquered, but a state of harmony with the very intelligence of the universe. He saw money not as paper or a number, but as the material expression of a frequency, a vibration that responds to those who have learned to communicate with it in its own language, the language of consciousness. In his studies about the nature of being and energy, Bentov discovered that every thought, every emotion, every intention produces measurable waves in the body's electromagnetic field. Our brains, our hearts, and even our organs vibrate like finely tuned instruments, and the sound we emit, invisible but real, echoes through the fabric of the universe. When a person lives immersed in thoughts of lack, fear, and urgency, they literally send chaotic signals into the quantum field. These disordered waves create interference, making it difficult for the natural flow of abundance to manifest in their life. But when the mind enters harmony, when the body and spirit breathe in coherence, something extraordinary happens. The energetic field expands. Bentov observed this clearly in his biofeedback experiments. The graphs showed smooth peaks, stable rhythms, and a higher vibrational pattern. In this state, the person stops being just an individual trying to survive in the world and becomes a conscious antenna, capable of attracting and manifesting what once seemed distant. Money, in this context, stops being a goal and becomes a consequence. It moves toward those who vibrate in tune with its nature, because the energy of abundance recognizes itself. Scarcity, on the other hand, is just the echo of a mind misaligned with the universal flow. Bentov saw this not as a metaphor, but as physics applied to consciousness, a measurable and real phenomenon. Most people try to change reality without changing the internal vibration that sustains it. They want abundance but think in terms of lack. They want to prosper but doubt their own worthiness. And the universe, obedient to the dominant vibration, simply replicates the signal it receives. That's why Bentov said, "It's not the world that resists you, it's you who vibrate against the world." By understanding this principle, one's relationship with money transforms deeply. The anxious pursuit gives way to conscious harmony. Desperate action is replaced by presence and clarity. The field around begins to respond. The right people appear, ideas flow, opportunities reveal themselves effortlessly. Money begins to flow in the same measure that the mind calms and the heart trusts. And it is exactly at this point that Bentov deepens his teaching. The universe does not respond to force, but to resonance. Abundance is not attracted, it is mirrored. And understanding this is the first step to reaching the second level, the sympathetic resonance with the zero field, where all energy is born and returns. Bentov said that the universe is not an empty space full of disconnected objects, but an immense vibrating field where everything is in constant relationship. He called this invisible space the zero-point field, a primordial energetic matrix where the potential for all forms of existence rests. For him, this field was not just a mystical theory, but a physical reality, tangible to those who develop enough sensitivity to perceive it. The zero point is the cradle of movement, the silent source from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. And it is in this invisible ocean that the laws of resonance operate with mathematical perfection. Bentov observed that, just as two pendulums can spontaneously synchronize their movements when sharing the same environment, human consciousness can also tune itself with higher frequencies, including the frequency of abundance. This tuning, which he called sympathetic resonance, is the key to transforming effort into flow. Most people, he said, live disconnected from this principle. They were conditioned to believe that obtaining money requires struggle, pressure, and control. But the universe does not respond to tension, it responds to harmony. When the mind tries to force the flow, it creates vibrational friction. This resistance is the reason why so many work tirelessly but remain trapped in cycles of scarcity. Effort, when not born of inner coherence, turns into noise in the field. And noise blocks the natural return of energy. Bentov saw human consciousness as a living antenna. When that antenna vibrates in disorder, oscillating between fear, doubt, and need, it tunes into realities compatible with that frequency. But when the antenna is adjusted, when the mind becomes silent and the heart opens, the tuning completely changes. The being enters into harmony with the universal field and, at that moment, the flow of energy begins to reorganize. Money, opportunities, and coincidences start to manifest not as a reward, but as the inevitable consequence of the vibration emitted. Sympathetic resonance is what explains phenomena that many call luck or miracle. Bentov stated that chance does not exist. What exists is tuning. When you vibrate in coherence with the field of abundance, everything that is out of harmony begins to dissolve. People, situations, and even old thoughts lose strength because they no longer correspond to the new frequency. The universe is precise. It only responds to what vibrates in compatibility with its own pulse. He used to illustrate this simply. He said, "Money is a song that's already playing. If you don't hear it, it's not because it doesn't exist, but because you haven't yet tuned your instrument. And this tuning doesn't happen through effort, but through stillness. The more the human being tries to control the rhythm of life, the further they move away from the melody. But when they learn to listen, to be present, the sound of the field reveals itself, and with it comes synchronicity, flow, and balance." Modern physics is beginning to confirm what Bentov already intuited decades ago. The quantum vacuum is not empty, it is a pulsating ocean of energy. Every particle, every thought, every human heartbeat is a wave interacting with this field. When the internal vibration comes into phase with the vibration of the zero field, an invisible yet powerful energetic exchange occurs. You no longer need to seek what you desire, you become part of the very flow that contains it. This is the essence of sympathetic resonance. It is not matter that creates consciousness, it is consciousness that shapes matter. And the higher a being's vibrational pattern, the faster they collapse the field's possibilities into tangible reality. Bentov also observed something deeply liberating. Every attempt to manipulate reality externally is useless if the internal pattern is not aligned. The universe is not deceived by words or superficial intentions. It responds to the real vibration you emit, the one that arises from what you truly feel. That is why, for many, the law of attraction seems to fail. It's not that the principle doesn't work. It's that the internal frequency remains trapped in fear, even when the mind repeats words of prosperity. True transformation begins when the being stops fighting and starts cooperating with the flow. When they learn that the zero field is not a force to be controlled, but a consciousness to be understood. At that point, sympathetic resonance becomes natural. Life begins to reflect what is most harmonious within you. Money arises as a reflection of vibrational coherence, not as the result of physical effort. And it is exactly in this state of harmony that Bentov perceived the birth of an even rarer phenomenon, a moment when all parts of the human being vibrate as a single system, without conflict, without noise, without dispersion. He called this point internal coherence, where human consciousness fully aligns with the symphony of the universe. For Itzhak Bentov, the entire universe is an orchestra vibrating in different tones of consciousness. Every cell, every thought, every emotion emits a frequency that contributes to the symphony of being. When the individual is out of alignment, when the body says one thing, the mind thinks another, and the heart feels something completely different, the energetic field fragments. Bentov called this state internal incoherence and stated that it is in this condition that the human being loses contact with the natural flow of abundance. During his studies on meditation and altered states, he discovered that there is a precise point where all the frequencies of being align. At that moment, the brain waves of both hemispheres enter perfect synchrony, the heart regulates its rhythm, and the entire body vibrates cohesively. It is what he described as the tuned resonance pattern, a state in which human consciousness becomes crystalline and the universe responds with mathematical precision. In this state of coherence, thought ceases to be mere mental activity and becomes a creative force. Intention no longer scatters in internal contradictions. When the mind thinks of abundance and the heart feels fear, there is a vibrational conflict. But when both emit the same signal, the quantum field responds instantly. Bentov demonstrated this in his biofeedback experiments. Individuals in coherence displayed harmonic, expansive wave patterns, as if the entire body had become a single tuned instrument. Internal coherence, therefore, is the point where the human being stops fighting against themselves. It is the state where energy is no longer spent on doubts, fears, and attempts at control. The person feels that the universe and they are breathing together, as if they were the same organism. At this point, coincidences begin to multiply. Opportunities appear naturally, decisions become intuitive and precise, and the flow of life seems to adjust effortlessly. Bentov said that coherence is not something to be achieved, but something that reveals itself when the inner noise ceases. The ego, with its comparisons and fears, creates the distortions that fragment the field. When these noises fall silent, harmony appears on its own, like a river that has always been there, merely covered by layers of sand. And it is in this state of inner alignment that a phenomenon he often observed among his students and practitioners occurs: synchronicities. People reported receiving exactly what they needed at the right moment: a phone call, an idea, an encounter. Bentov saw this not as magic, but as a direct consequence of vibrational coherence. When consciousness is tuned, the universe becomes cooperative. It responds as a perfect echo to the waves you emit. What many traditions call a miracle, Bentov called the natural response of the coherent field. He believed that when the human being aligns internally, the quantum field responds like a mirror. If there is clarity, the reflection is clear. If there is confusion, the reflection is distorted. Abundance does not arrive by chance. It is attracted by the vibrational stability of being. Internal coherence is not just a spiritual state, it is a technology of consciousness. When the brain and heart enter synchronization, there is a release of energy in the nervous system that alters the perception of reality. Time seems to expand, thoughts slow down, and the individual experiences a profound sense of completeness. At that moment, scarcity loses meaning, because the being realizes they are already part of the field of abundance. Bentov explained that this state is the true turning point of human experience. In it, the individual stops trying to attract what they desire and begins to live as if they are already part of what they seek. The vibration changes and the field responds. Money, in this context, is merely one of the manifestations of this coherence, a material reflection of inner harmony. But to reach this coherence, something deeper must happen. Bentov realized that as long as the ego dominates the stage, harmony is impossible. The ego creates separation, feeds fear, and reinforces the belief in scarcity. Therefore, the next step of the journey is inevitable: the dissolution of the economic ego. Only when the I that seeks control becomes silent can true abundance manifest without resistance. At a certain point in the journey, an invisible barrier arises that prevents the flow of abundance from fully manifesting: the economic ego. It is the voice that whispers of lack, that compares, that calculates, that measures the value of everything based on separation. It is the fragment of consciousness that believes itself to be alone in a competitive universe, fighting for scarce resources. This mental structure, which humanity has learned to call I, is also the main filter that distorts the vibration of abundance. The ego operates at the frequency of fear. It fears losing, fears not being enough, fears not being in control. And the more fear there is, the lower the vibration that is emitted. This dense energy field is incompatible with the field of abundance, which is light, fluid, and expansive. That is why, even when someone tries to think positively or repeat affirmations of prosperity, if the ego still governs silently, the vibration remains misaligned. The universe does not respond to words, but to the vibrational tone that sustains them. During states of deep meditation, when the noise of thought calms down, an extraordinary phenomenon occurs: the temporary collapse of the self, that believes itself to be separate. It is as if the mind momentarily loses control over the narrative, and in that silence, a greater presence reveals itself. This expanded consciousness perceives that life is not outside of it but manifesting through it. And it is in this space that scarcity dissolves like mist in the sunlight. The economic ego sees money as something external, something to be conquered. It feeds on the idea that it will only have peace once it accumulates enough. But awakened consciousness understands the opposite. Money is an expression of the inner state. It flows where there is space, where energy is free from fear. When the mind is freed from the need to control, the field reorganizes itself. Resources, people, and opportunities begin to gravitate around the being in harmony. This dissolution is not annihilation, it is integration. The ego does not need to be destroyed, only understood. When consciousness observes it without judgment, something begins to change. The mechanism of fear loses strength. The I, that once believed itself to be the center, stops fighting and begins to serve as a channel. In that instant, the energy of abundance begins to flow again. The absence of ego is also the presence of trust. It is the state in which the human being stops asking, how, and begins to live in a state of intelligent surrender. This surrender is not passivity, it is perception. It is understanding that the universe has a rhythm and that every step is guided by wisdom greater than the mind can comprehend. When this trust settles in, anxiety disappears and money ceases to be a concern. It becomes a natural extension of inner harmony. The dissolution of the economic ego also brings deep emotional liberation. Suddenly, personal worth no longer depends on a bank balance, achievements, or external recognition. The vital energy that was once spent trying to prove something to the world is redirected toward creating, serving, expanding. At this point, the individual becomes truly abundant, because their vibration ceases to be lack and becomes contribution. The quantum field responds to this immediately. Life begins to organize itself around this new vibration. Situations of scarcity dissolve, relationships fall into harmony, and the necessary resources appear in unexpected ways. All because the self that needed to have gives way to the being that allows flow. At this level of consciousness, the perception of separation disappears. Money ceases to be seen as an autonomous entity and comes to be recognized as a form of energy circulating among cooperating consciousnesses. The being understands that nothing is ever lost, only transformed, and that the universe, in its essence, is self-regulated by continuous exchange. This is the moment when consciousness awakens to a new understanding. What we call prosperity is not found in the act of accumulating, but in allowing movement. Money is energy in transit, and the freer the flow, the greater the abundance perceived. And as this perception deepens, a new understanding begins to emerge, something that transcends even the linear notion of time. For when the ego falls silent and the being vibrates in total coherence, past and future lose their boundaries. There arises the recognition that everything already exists now, in the eternal present. The next discovery reveals itself at this point. Time is not a line, it is a field. And it is within this field that instantaneous manifestation becomes possible. When the mind frees itself from the tyranny of the ego, it begins to perceive time in a completely new way. What once seemed like a rigid sequence of past, present, and future reveals itself as a single tapestry vibrating at different frequencies of reality. Awakened consciousness discovers that time is not a line, but a field where all possibilities already coexist, waiting only for the moment when someone tunes into the right frequency to bring them to the surface. In this state, tomorrow ceases to be a distant place and becomes a vibration accessible now. The version of yourself that lives in abundance, peace, and wholeness already exists, not at some point in the future, but here in a parallel dimension of consciousness. The distance between that reality and the one you live in is not measured in kilometers or minutes, but in frequency. The closer your vibration gets to that version of yourself, the faster the quantum collapse occurs, and what once seemed impossible begins to materialize before your eyes. The researcher understood that time is only a useful illusion created by the mind to organize human experience. But at the level of pure consciousness, everything happens simultaneously. That is why, in deep meditative states, so many people report feeling that the past, present, and future merge. In this timeless space, the now is absolute. And it is precisely there that manifestation becomes instantaneous. The linear mind believes that it takes time to achieve something, time to gather money, time to realize a dream, time to change one's life. But that concept belongs to the dimension of effort, not vibration. Abundance doesn't need to arrive. It is already here, waiting for consciousness to align with it. When the being enters vibrational coherence, the field reorganizes instantly. Matter responds to intention in the same way that a shadow responds to the movement of light. Modern quantum physics is beginning to glimpse this reality. Experiments show that the observer directly influences the behavior of subatomic particles. The mere presence of consciousness changes the result. This means that every thought, every emotion, and every mental image are vibrational commands that shape the field around you. The difference is that while most people emit contradictory signals, those who reach higher states of coherence vibrate with precision, and the universe, like a perfect echo, responds at that very moment. This understanding changes everything. The search ceases and remembrance is born. You don't need to create abundance. You need to remember that you are already part of it. When consciousness expands to that point, time becomes a malleable tool. It becomes possible to access the future, not to predict it, but to live it now through the corresponding vibration. Conscious visualization is the instrument of that bridge. But it is not about wishing intensely or imagining with anxiety. It is a state of active observation, in which the person feels the future as a present reality, with gratitude and certainty. In that moment, the mind does not ask. It witnesses. It knows that the field has already responded, and therefore, it relaxes. The paradox is that it is in that relaxation that the collapse of the wave function occurs and reality materializes. When the human being realizes this, haste disappears. Faith ceases to be blind belief and becomes direct perception. Time, once seen as an obstacle, becomes an ally. Everything you desire already exists, and the path to it is simply the process of vibrational alignment. And this discovery brings a feeling of such deep freedom that many describe it as a kind of rebirth. The weight of the not yet disappears. Waiting dissolves. Consciousness rests in the certainty that everything is now. But to sustain this new perception, one must remain awake. The challenge is not to reach the timeless state, but not to lose oneself again in identification with thoughts and emotions that distort vibration. That's why the next step on the journey is to learn to observe, to witness one's own mental flow without being carried away by it. This is the secret to maintaining alignment with the field of abundance, and it is here that true practice begins. Itzhak Bentov believed that the greatest power of the human being is not in controlling the world but in observing oneself. He called this ability witnessing consciousness, the capacity to perceive one's own thoughts, emotions, and impulses without being carried away by them. According to him, this is the true point of freedom, the portal that keeps the vibration of abundance stable and elevated. Bentov said that thought is a living force. Every idea, every emotion, generates a measurable vibration in the energy field. When the individual identifies with the incessant flow of the mind, they become a slave to their own vibrational waves, reacting automatically to everything they feel. But when the observer arises, the one who perceives thought without becoming the thought, a new dimension of consciousness opens. The being ceases to be the reflection of its beliefs, and becomes the conductor of its own field. The practice Bentov taught was simple in form but profound in its effects. He asked his students to sit in silence and simply observe. Observe the breath, the sensations, the sounds, and above all, the movement of the mind. Thoughts about money, fear of loss, comparisons, expectations. Everything was to be seen with neutrality. Do not fight anything, he would say, just see. Because the act of observing with presence is already a form of transformation. And indeed, he observed that the mere act of witnessing a thought changes its frequency. When fear is seen, it loses substance. When judgment is recognized, it dissolves. Witnessing consciousness functions like light. It does not fight darkness. It simply reveals it, and revelation is enough to dissolve it. Bentov understood that the great human challenge is that the mind is addicted to movement. It seeks problems, invents urgencies, replays the past, and anticipates the future. It is a constant attempt to control life's flow, and it is precisely this movement that creates vibrational resistance. When the individual begins to observe this activity without participating in it, something shifts in the energetic structure. The heartbeat stabilizes, the brain enters coherence, and the field around harmonizes. It is in this state that abundance flows freely again. Witnessing consciousness, according to Bentov, is the heart of modern spiritual practice. It is not about running away from thoughts, but becoming so conscious of them that you realize they are not you. You are the one who observes them. And this recognition, simple yet profound, makes the entire dynamic of energy reorganize itself. The being stops vibrating in fear and begins to vibrate in presence. Over time, this practice transforms the perception of reality. The mind, once noisy, begins to function like a tuned instrument, and the body becomes receptive to the intelligence of the universal field. Money, once a source of worry, becomes merely a natural manifestation of this harmony. The being realizes it no longer needs to chase anything, because everything it seeks is already around it. Bentov used to say that abundance is the natural state of awakened consciousness. And that is why silent observation is so powerful. It removes the being from the illusion of lack and returns it to the original flow of life. In that flow there is no urgency, no fear, no separation. There is only the movement of energy expressing itself freely through the consciousness that observe. To practice witnessing consciousness is to cultivate that serenity. It is learning to remain present even when the mind tries to flee into the past or get lost in the future. It is to breathe and see, without judgment, without haste, without control. Because every time you observe a thought without clinging to it, you dissolve a layer of resistance. And with each layer that dissolves, the vibration rises. In the end, Bentov taught that the purpose of all spiritual practice is to remember who observe. When the being recognizes that it is the very consciousness that witnesses the universe, money, time, and circumstances become merely expressions of the same energy. Abundance ceases to be an objective and becomes a consequence. And that is how the circle closes. The one who has learned to observe discovers that there is nothing more to seek, because everything is already present. The universe now responds in unison to your vibration. The entire field bows to the awakened consciousness that contemplates it. And what remains is only the flow, the silent dance between the observer and the observed, in perfect harmony with the abundance that has always been there, waiting to be seen. If you have come this far, something within you has already begun to change. Because understanding what Itzhak Bentov revealed is not just acquiring knowledge. It is beginning a process of vibrational transformation. Now you know that money does not come from outside. It is born from your internal coherence, from the point where body, mind, and consciousness come into harmony with the universal field. So I ask you, what are you emitting today? What frequencies are your body and mind sending out to the universe, even when you believe you are thinking positively? The truth is that the field does not respond to your words. It responds to your vibration. Do you want to attract abundance? Then learn to feel it before it arrives. Live as if you already have it. Give thanks as if you've already received it. Breathe as one who is already at peace. Because the universe does not understand lack. It understands coherence. And perhaps now you understand something even deeper. Money was never the true goal. It is merely a mirror, reflecting the state of your consciousness. When the mind vibrates in fear, the reflection shows scarcity. When it vibrates in trust and presence, the reflection shows flow. The change, therefore, begins within, and when the inside changes, the outside has no choice but to follow. But remember, knowing this is not enough. It must be practiced. You must observe yourself every day until the old pattern dissolves and witnessing consciousness becomes your natural state. Only then does the vibration of abundance stabilize and the field begin to respond with precision. So I challenge you, in the coming days, observe your thoughts about money. Notice how many times you vibrate in lack, fear, or doubt. And when that happens, breathe. Witness. Don't fight. Just see. Because the simple act of observing already changes the frequency. Now it's your turn to choose which reality you want to live in, scarcity or harmony. If this message touched you, if it awakened something within, I invite you to continue this journey with me. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. Together, we will keep exploring consciousness, breaking old beliefs, and learning to vibrate at the frequency of true abundance. Because the universe doesn't choose favorites, it only responds to the vibration you decide to sustain.